Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, a sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
And so as long as the Electoral College is in place, our votes are in presidential elections and general elections are like are statements of spirit, really. It is an uphill climb for these red states. And when it boils down to the 10 states and when it really boils down to the 5 states, and that's where the fight's going to be for those Electoral College votes. And it could go either way, while at the same time we're winning the popular vote by a huge amount. I mean, it's getting rid of the Electoral College is probably impossible in terms of the constitutional requirements that would be necessary, but state governments can begin to apportion their electors by congressional districts at least, and begin as Nebraska and some others do, and begin to loosen the grip of this, so that if we just had one, everybody goes to Omaha, Nebraska, a conservative red state, because Omaha, Nebraska is not necessarily that conservative, and that one Electoral College votes is up for grabs. And so we would see the same thing here if we could get legislation passed to apportion by congressional districts, and that's probably the best we can do in regards to that.
Representative Dollens, you want to ask another question or speak up?
He's got to be unmuted.
There we go.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Governor, since we're along the topic of reforms and protecting democracy, I was wondering what your thoughts are on perhaps ways we can strengthen the citizen-led ballot initiative in the midst of GOP-controlled states across the country, working in a concerted effort to dismantle that process and make it much more difficult. I'm currently in Indianapolis right now, and I've had the opportunity to speak at great lengths with the Ohio delegation, and they're coming off their amazing defeat of Issue 1, which would have raised the passing threshold from a simple majority to 60%. And I've been gaining or learning a little bit more about their messaging and whatnot, but then also looking with NCSL being able to compare what different states have in relation to ours when it comes to a very limited 90-day window, pretty high percentage thresholds for signature gathering. One, I wondered what your thoughts are, to sum that up, on this concerted effort to discredit and make the ballot initiative more difficult. And then also, what are some reforms like expanding the 90-day window that you think we could implement to make that process stronger and better for citizens in Oklahoma?
Well, the 90-day window is tough, and but look at all the changes that they've proposed to make it worse. I mean, as you well know, they have proposed Ohio changes on steroids. And so we're really kind of in a defensive posture. If we can just keep the ability to collect signatures, we can do it in 90 days. It'd be better to have more, but they're not going to give us more, for the foreseeable future. But the important thing is to make sure, and this is a critical element of messaging. Who doesn't want to be able to express themselves directly on a public policy? The initiative process that we've got in Oklahoma was put there for a reason. We were a populous state. People wanted to have their voices heard, and if by God, if the legislature wasn't going to do it, they wanted to have the ability to go direct. Then they were given that, and since that time, it keeps getting tightened up because legislators are a little offended by the fact that they get overridden on popular public policies. And so, but more importantly, they know that our population is more progressive than the leadership in the legislature as it stands currently. And so they just don't want to get sidetracked by any other progressive changes, like protection of women's health issues and other things. And so I think it's a great point, because when we lose that ability, first of all, I think it'll be unconstitutional, and we need to be raising the money to challenge that and these changes in court as they go further and further. But if we lose that ability, well, then we're really stuck with these hypermajority conservatives. And I've got a lot of friends that argue for nonpartisan elections in the legislature, that we ought to have a open ballot, nonpartisan, everybody vote, and you begin to work your way away from these extremes. We always act, and we have this false equivalency, like there's extremes. I don't really see extremes in our party. What I see is just off the edge, democracy canceling, constitutional, outlaws that are willing to do anything to maintain power. And so that would be a radical solution. I'm not sure that gets passed, but there are some of these things that would get to the ballot, whether it's open primaries or nonpartisan elections at the legislative level, that I think the public might respond to in a positive way. And I know the open primaries approach is continues to be debated, but my thought is that you're going to have to be fairly moderate, whether you're liberal or conservative, in order to get through that primary process, as opposed to what we have now, a hypermajority where the craziest person in the Republican Party is going to get nominated to run in these offices. And again, Brian Walters is a great example of that. His favorable, unfavorables was all upside down and in a mess, and Stitz are too, but nonetheless, they're still powerful within that primary base, and it'll be interesting to see who they nominate coming out of that, given the kind of the radical elements they have. So,
do you have a hard stop here at 11 o'clock, or can you go on just a couple more minutes?
I don't. I'm happy to go. I was a little delayed getting on. Fortunately, you were having technical difficulties, so I didn't get blamed for it. So I'm very happy to continue for a few minutes.
So when we commit to giving financial contributions to the Democratic Party, do you remember right off the top of your head what the percentage of those contributions are used within Oklahoma?
Kevin, my understanding, they're all used here. In fact, we import dollars from one of the things I did, Jim Frazier's wife, Sally, who's since passed away, was ill, and he had to step down as the national committeeman. He asked me if I would step in for him. The Central Committee elected me to fill that vacancy, and then I ran and was elected as the Democratic national committeeman. And I thought, and that's about 400 people that show up, twice a year, various locations for meetings, et cetera. And I thought, if I'm going to spend the time doing this, I want to be on their executive committee. So I ran to be elected by the 14 Midwestern states to serve on the executive committee of the DNC. And that's about a 45-member group that meets more frequently. And I don't want to pretend like we have any stroke at all about, telling the president or the chair of the party what it is we want them to do. Frankly, it operates in the reverse. But we do have a much broader voice at the table. And one of the things I did from day one was, every time Jamie Harrison, the chair of the party, would has calls. He's got one tomorrow afternoon with DNC members. He has them all the time. And you get your hand up early, you're going to get called on. And every time I would ask for the same thing, that says, you got to be building the bench. It's the same kind of argument that others would make to us about rural counties. You can't continue to ignore these dark red states. You got to give us enough to survive. And so we receive, I don't know how much of the money is, but it's a lot more. We used to receive nothing, and now we receive 10, 15,000. We get grant money, 10 or 15,000 a month. We get grant money. We get other things from the national party. So the national party is generously, and I think wisely, providing support for these red state parties that they desperately need until we're able to elect a few more legislators and statewide officers.
We had Ken Martin on a few months ago, and what an outstanding representative of the DNC. He was just an amazing speaker, and he echoed the exact same thing that you just said. So, Representative Turner, do you want to join us on here and ask a question? I think I've asked you to unmute. I'm hoping that everything works here.
Yeah, it does. I do have a hard stop. So there was one other thing that I think I just wanted to say, for maybe if folks are going to come back and watch this, like any younger folks who are thinking about running for office, so I think sometimes people kind of highlight my race as like it's something that you're able to do in a place like House District 88 specifically. But I ran against a 6-year Democratic incumbent and ran to the left of a 6-year Democratic incumbent. In order to do that, we had to turn out a new electorate. Those were Democrats who consistently showed up to elections that felt like, one, we had to persuade some of those historic voters, right, to take a chance on something new. But then, two, we also had to bring people back to politics who hadn't voted yet and or who had felt like they had been discarded by the Democratic Party, right? I get to sit in a very unique place with several lenses of being a trans non-binary Oklahoman, a Muslim Oklahoman, a Black Oklahoman, to represent a historically white held seat, right? We made historic strides. House District 88 made historic strides at every point in this election and did so within the confines of COVID too, right? That was when we first ran for office. And so we had folks showing up to volunteer for this campaign that had been laid off by their work, but because they found hope, not only in someone running for office, right, but in the things that I was representing, that I am representing, right, and the conversations that we get to have, that we've started, that nobody was willing to touch in Oklahoma. And it takes all of those things, right? Like the same thing that happened in House District 88 can happen in Carter County, can happen in Love County, like any place, right? But we had to put forth a Democrat and or an independent or whoever, right, that is truly representative of the people and the things that they're asking for. And so I want folks who are thinking about running, right, and did that, like, I don't make enough money to be able to run for office. I don't come with the financial backing, right? Like we ran a campaign that raised roughly maybe $40,000 against a $200,000 incumbent. And who outspent us, absolutely, right? But we had the on the ground work. Like I am a community organizer, House District 88, most Oklahomans are community organizers, especially in rural Oklahoma, right? Like if you are willing to put in and have the ability to, right, put in that legwork, because I had to leave my job at the ACLU in order to run for office. And so just saying, like, also, we have to be able to create a financial net to be able to hold folks that are really the future of the Democratic Party, to create the type of Oklahoma that is a place that fully funds public education, right? Access to healthcare, a living wage, but also it's so much more, right? Schools like Oklahoma City Public Schools has implemented a policy to where no students have to pay for public lunch. But if we could grow that beyond, right, Oklahoma City, right, that's the type of Oklahoma that I want to see. And I think most of us agree with, right? And it takes folks who are more closely related or in more close proximity to the problems to have to for those solutions, right? Because they've been putting in those solutions like duct tape on their lives every single day, right? In order to make it work for them. And how do we take that duct tape and create an infrastructure that really holds us all, right? So those are just like some of the things that I'm thinking about, like when we're looking at folks to run for office, right? It is not just about the strategy we have, but we actually have to have people, community members running for office that folks are willing to get into the mess with, because nobody wants to touch Oklahoma politics because of the way it looks in the Oklahoma legislature right now. It's so hard to get involved in a place that continuously says, I know more about your healthcare. I know more about what you're able to do as a healthcare provider. I know more about what you should be doing with your everyday life than you do. And that's why I'm here, right? But we need folks who are bound in being able to take care of each other and making sure that their neighbors are fed, right, at the end of the day. And so the name recognition I had happened because I had already been organizing in House District 88 long before I even knew what a House district was, right? But even still, that wasn't enough weight to be able to bring in the donors, right? And so when we started having folks donate from around the nation, right, that let us know that folks, one, small dollar donors really got us to where we needed to be, which was just fine, because I don't want to run a campaign that is taking so much money that we can't fund the mutual aid that Oklahomans are surviving on right now because our government has left us out to dry. And so, yet again, I think this is more specifically for folks who are thinking about running and or who are thinking about working on a worthwhile campaign, is that you can do it. Whoever you are, wherever you are. I grew up in Ardmore, Oklahoma, small town Oklahoma at that point in time. Didn't even know a thing about politics outside of student government, right? And here I am, of all places. I went to Oklahoma State University to become a veterinarian. I like to think I still work with animals today, but a different type. And the passion to be able to take care of one another. That's the only thing I really want to do at the end of the day, is take care of my neighbors. And so I think that's the Oklahoma standard that we are looking for and continuously trying to create. And so if you want to run for office, if you want to work on a campaign, I think you absolutely should. I don't think you should let the money stop you. You've got the foundation in the community to help you build something really, really beautiful. And I only know that because that's what House District 88 did, and every other House district that I've ever lived in. So sorry to take so much of your time. Thank you so much for this absolutely wonderful conversation. And I look forward to connecting with you all at a later time. So sorry, I have to hop off.
Well, thank you so much for joining. We are really grateful for you being able to take the time that you had to come in and have this conversation. Your statements were absolutely spot on. We appreciate everything that you've said. And again, my apology that I said earlier is heartfelt. It's coming from the heart. So I hope that we can spend some time hand in hand doing some outreach within your community at some point. We do have one more. Do you have a comment about what she said before we move on to the next question, Governor?
I just, what a great story it is, and it was beautifully stated. And so I congratulate Representative Turner for what she's doing to create a new electorate, or to help add to the electorate. In many respects, we saw that in the early 90s. Just because I was a new face, I was saying different things, and I was I was unknown, and so our volunteers were fantastic, and the campaign caught fire, and we nearly won even back then. And so you can, in the semblance of that, a lot of times people want folks to moderate what they say because they're trying to appeal to the broadest base, and yet you see on the Republican side, they have this kind of rock solid base because they speak directly to them. I think we need to speak directly to our base and what we believe and how we stand, particularly when it comes to issues of diversity and disrespect and discrimination. It's in our platform. Our position on tribal governments is in the platform. Nobody reads platforms anymore, except that the new platform committee has a new streamlined, condensed version of it. I'd encourage you to go to the party and open it up and read it. It's just like on top of the national party, and it's really well stated. Jeff Barong led that committee out in Western Oklahoma, another rural Western leader. And so great story by Representative Turner, and wish her all the best.
So I've got one more person introduced to you before we call this quits. And this is introduction to Madeline Ryan Smith. She's running for Georgia House District 158. And she's just an outstanding person. And I think she's going to blow your socks off. Really, I do. I think you're going to be very impressed by this young person. So, Madeline, you want to come on and make your comment or question?
I just say not much going on in Georgia these days, is there?
Not much. No, not much at all. We've sent the request to you. She cannot unmute herself. Let me see if I can unmute you for you. Let me see how this works. I'm going to lower the hand and ask to unmute. More.
There we go. Hello, everybody.
There you are.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes. Can you hear us?
Yes, yes. Hello from Georgia, everybody. And I just had one kind of echo of a comment that I think was said earlier and then a question. So I am the oldest Gen Zer you'll probably find anywhere. I just turned 26 this year, and I'm kind of the face of the Gen Z population in the Democratic Party as far as Georgia goes. I think I'm the only Gen Z candidate so far that's announced in the whole state that they're running for any kind of office. But I think it was said earlier that, there's a lot of first-time candidates, young candidates that walk into a space in any political level and think, oh, I can do this with $0 and no help. I've seen that a lot. I've talked to so many people my age and even younger than me, people who are 18, 19, 20 and are looking at their city council or whatever have you, that, oh, I can do this by myself. I don't need help. And while I do believe that you don't need as much physical monetary support to win an election, that is definitely something that you cannot do alone. I'm a big believer in there's no I in team. And, just for anyone watching this afterwards, especially young people coming into politics for the first time, thinking about running for office for the first time, you cannot do that alone. Whether you have paid help, you have a great set of volunteers, you grab your friends and your family to help you out, that's great. Just know that you can't do it alone. I've learned that the hard way. So, it's always valuable to have that volunteer base, and that even if it's just a sounding board of someone that you can call and ask for advice or for help, I think that's meaningful. And on the flip side of that, my question is, as someone who is young, I'm coming into my race running for the second time against a Republican incumbent who has been in that seat for over 30 years, and we're just in a very red area. But when I say red, we're not Trump supporting MAGA red down here. We're religiously red. We're Republicans, conservatives, your classic conservatives. And I have found some difficulty getting into the spaces of more conservative minds without people looking at me and saying, oh, you're a young white woman, you're a socialist, or you're a communist, or I don't want you in office because I think you're a regurgitation of AOC. And, I'm not like that. My political views are not like that. I label myself as a moderate, but I'm running on the Democratic ticket. I was raised by an Irish Catholic woman. So it's, best of both worlds. But what would your advice be as someone who has had that experience and in your belt? What do you do to get into those spaces with people who would ordinarily not agree with anything that you're saying?
Well, Madeline, congratulations on your activism and your running for office and your understanding that it takes a village. And so I applaud what you're doing. From my standpoint, I think there's, it's important to politely point out the ills of the incumbent in the office. And so that person's voting record, who's been there forever, has institutionalized a lot of problems that need to be fixed. And so whether it's healthcare or mental health or education funding or infrastructure or what have you, those things, I think when you boil it down to the practical elements and particularly in your district, things that are wrong that doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out. It's not that complicated. It just needs to be fixed. And they're not providing the fix. And then, you know, the last, you probably can't wear a Joe Biden shirt around your district, but you know, I find it pretty easy to go to toe to toe with people over Joe Biden and basically say, look, I know the president, but you know, I'm for anybody that gets it done. And boy, you talk about somebody that getting it done. I mean, this Infrastructure Reduction Act and what that has done for renewable generation while seemingly the whole world's on fire and we're all about to suffocate from the heat. And you know, the evidence is there. And what he's done to move the needle, I'm in the power business. It is just extraordinary. And you know, giving Indian tribes, for example, the right to convert to cash the tax credits, and the municipalities and others, the subsidies, the guarantees, the rest of it. It has just been remarkable how much they have done there. And then the CHIPS Act and what that's going to do to manufacturing. Manufacturing in the U.S. is skyrocketing all of a sudden. And why? Solely because of Biden's initiative and a Democratic legislature. And so you can't nationalize your race and probably make much traction. But I would boil that down to to Democratic programs that make all the sense in the world, and just put it on a business basis. You know, we increased education funding by huge amounts in Oklahoma way back when by cutting budgets. And there's nothing wrong with saying some state agencies have outlived their usefulness. Some are either misdirected. Some are there for a problem that doesn't exist any longer. And so, you know, a review of all state agencies looking for a certain percentage of funding, and you're going to propose that, and the percentage you're looking for is 10% savings to be redirected to higher priority. You know, that kind of thing, I think is maybe a little bit too techno, maybe a little bit too numbers, but your job that you'll relay to them is your sole purpose is to improve the quality of life for Georgians, and you're going to be on it day and night, and this other chap is not.
Well, that is going to do it for our time today. I think we've had you on here for just a little over an hour. We apologize for the technical difficulties, but again, it was such an honor and a privilege to have you with us. And what an outstanding conversation. I mean, you have just really filled us with an immense amount of knowledge, inspiration. We can't thank you enough for coming on and having this conversation, and probably one of the most important conversations we've had on this space for quite some time. And we are really, again, honored. It's a privilege. So thank you for coming on Coffee with Democrats.
You're very welcome, and thank you all for this vehicle that you're providing. And I never for a minute thought I would be giving advice to a Georgia legislative candidate, and what fun that is. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. She's somebody that I'm going to look for. I think she will be on the national stage in about 10 years. So I'm looking forward to her growth. So again, thank you very much, Governor Walters. It's again a great pleasure. It's good to see you again, and look forward to seeing you.
If I could just say one thing, because we talk so much about problems and the difficulties, and I want people to know that you got to pay attention. You got to be vocal, and these candidates, of course, know that. And I think rational, fact-based, polite issue discussions hit enough of a majority that we can win again. We can win more than we have before. Please give to the Oklahoma Democratic Party and the Georgia Democratic Party and whatever other states involved. You don't have to give very much. They have a automatic giving amount. You sign up for $5 or $10, or if you're feeling generous, $50. Sign up for that monthly withdrawal from the account. That makes all the difference in the world. We've got really good leadership in the Oklahoma Democratic Party. I'm proud of Alicia Andrews and the work that she's done. She's been reelected, I think, now to her third term. We added a legislative seat last cycle. We're growing majorities in the metropolitan areas. We're outreaching to rural areas. I just think there's a lot to be hopeful for, even in what would be characterized as a deep red state. And so don't despair, pay attention, be vocal, and run for office if you can.
Well, great commentary and a great closure to our space. So again, thank you very much. And we look forward to you coming on the next time.
Thank you.
All right. Until then, we'll be back on here next Thursday. We had reached out to Joy Hoffmeister, hoping that she can join us. I'm not sure whether that's going to take place, but we are going to have another space next Thursday. And again, until then, everybody, please be safe. And again, thank you, Governor Walters.
All the best. Bye-bye.